What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. So we're finally getting some steam, some traction when it comes to Zach Wilson and him potentially being moved, specifically prior to the NFL draft kicking off, right? And so the ideal situation for the Jets is, even though this is probably going to be a very late day 3 pick, hopefully it's not conditional for one, and then of course that's just added ammo for Joe Douglas to try to use. This isn't one of those situations where I think Joe Douglas can pull a rabbit out of his hat, right? With Zach Wilson kind of getting that Jamarcus Russell treatment for the duration of his sophomore year going forward, it's hard to think about any team investing anything significant in them, and if so, then by all means let it happen, right? But we do seem to finally have a front runner. The Vikings seem to have a plan B in place if things go awry with Kirk Cousins, where Zach Wilson will become a prime candidate to get picked up via trade. So let's talk about some of the specifics here before we get into the value of what that could look like, right? Now, essentially, to kind of give a high-level perspective of the Vikings situation, Kirk Cousins still hasn't been signed, right? By the time you guys are watching this, it's going to be Monday morning, but before the 12 p.m. legal tampering, timeline, right? If Kirk Cousins was going to be signed, it seems likely that would have been occurred by now, right? The holdup most likely is Kirk Cousins broke history. He had, I think at his position for his value, et cetera, the first fully guaranteed contract in the NFL, right? And so from his position, he had the leverage to pull that off the first time. He has the leverage to try to pull that off again. It's just a matter of if the Vikings were going to hand that kind of contract over again for a quarterback coming off, season-ending injury. Can't remember what he had, maybe an ACL, Achilles, something like that. But nonetheless, season-ending injury, older quarterback. You love everything about his fit, etc. within that program, but still doesn't behoove them to invest that much of their resources into that position. It does kind of put them in a hole, though, right? But you look at the future. Justin Jefferson still needs, an extension at some point. He's going to reset the wide receiver market, and then of course they have some defensive pieces out there to tag along with that. T.J. Hockenson, I think, is probably coming up soon for an extension as well. So they have some pieces to be concerned about. The plan B appears to be to kind of give the quarterback room the equivalent of the the wide receiver room for the Baltimore Ravens. If you guys remember, the Ravens pulled off, I think, a first also in NFL history where their entire depth chart was filled with either current or former first-round picks that either they drafted, they acquired via trade, or picked up during via free agency, right? So that's awesome to see. I can see how that plan in theory should work out for the Vikings, but still, it's going to be a steep drop-off no matter what in this free agency class from Kirk Cousins to whoever else. The interesting piece here is that it seems like the focus is going to be on first rounders, but all of the first rounders happen to be quote unquote bust, right? You take a look at the quarterbacks available that they would be looking from. Everyone is from Zach Wilson's draft class, right? Zach Wilson himself, almost everybody. Sam Darnold, former first-round pick, though, considered a bust. Justin Fields, Trey Lance. Now, Zach Rosenblatt from The Athletic mentioned the, expected plan is that Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson will both be acquired via trade. They will battle during training camp to see who can earn the rights to become a starter. Sam Darnold does probably have the front running status, right? You take a look at his career arc. He's been, 3-4 years removed from the Jets, I believe now. Has a year of tutelage under Kyle Shanahan, which I'm sure is something a lot of teams will feel a lot more comfortable with. And if anybody was going to pull a Geno Smith type rebound off out of this group, it would be most likely Sam Darnold right now. Justin Fields I wouldn't consider a bust, so I'm kind of excluding him from that conversation. But we also heard this from, and I think this is a local news outlet and beat writer, but Darren Wolfson from KTSP also mentioned the Vikings' interest in Darnold and Wilson as plan Bs if they can't pull off an 11th hour move to get Kirk Cousins re-signed with the Vikings. Now, essentially all of this is music to my ears. Ideally, from the New York Jets perspective, we would want a draft pick and or draft picks for this current class. But when you take a look at the value, it does match up favorably with another recent trade that was pulled off. Mac Jones, also from Zach Wilson's draft class, was just traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 6th round pick. Now, when you take a look at career arcs for Zach Wilson and Mac Jones hasn't beat out, right? He's already been to the playoffs. He's been a Pro Bowl level player. Then things fell off. But you would look at Mac Jones and say a lot of that is circumstantial, right? After having a successful first year, they had a step back in the offensive coaching room around him, guys that have never been in the positions they've been in. Then by year 3, they lost faith. You have the multiple benchings, etc. With Zach Wilson, not only was it a terrible environment for him to really try to develop and manifest his talent in, but then you also had the fact that he looked absolutely irrevocably unplayable, right? It went from a guy that had Hall of Fame type arm talent, etc., to a guy that you wouldn't trust throwing around on the practice field to you to get some extra work in. So quite a steep fall. If Mac Jones is going for the value of a 6th round pick, I would have to imagine we're looking at a conditional 7th, right? Now, I would say this year, because ideally, if you can get a 6th or 7th round pick, you can remove those conditions from it. Next year, that becomes a little bit trickier to try to pull off. But nonetheless, if you can get anything for Zach Wilson, who's gotten the Jamarcus Russell treatment since his sophomore year on, then that's automatically a boost for us. Obviously, we're not getting anything close to the 2nd round. The 2nd overall pick we invested for Zach Wilson. But at this point, it is what it is. We all know that there's going to be a departure here. Now, the general thinking with picking up a guy like Zach Wilson is that in the right environment with the right coaching, he still has the talent to, at best, be a high-end backup, right? So if you're looking at the floor being a let's say a Jacoby Brissett type player, and the ceiling still being the guy that we saw in 2023 match and actually outbeat Patrick Mahomes when they played, even though Mahomes walked away with the win, then that's worth betting on, I suppose, especially if it's just going to be a late day 3 pick and potential day 3 pick, right? If conditions are on there, such as making the roster at a certain time, past the new league year or whatever, or having a certain amount of playing time as a starter. I'm not going to bat an eye on anything here. Ultimately, it just feels really, really good to know that he may be officially out of the building, not because of it being a wasted or terrible pick, but just because of all of the unnecessary drama that's been tied to it. From the New York Jets perspective, I'll be curious to see what Viking fans really feel about this potential plan, having a Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson pairing, or even if they went out there and got a Justin Fields and then paired him with, let's say, a Sam Darnold or a Zach Wilson, and then I'm assuming there's going to be a developmental pick that's going on somewhere. But it seems like ultimately from the Vikings perspective, they don't want to need to be pigeonholed, and I can't remember where they pick, but I want to say it's somewhere between 11 and 15. It's going to be out of range, obviously, for the top 3 guys, at least if you pay attention to projected picks. And then with J.J. McCarthy's hype continuing to shoot up, you can see him probably go in the top 10 as well. So then you're looking at maybe overreaching for Michael Penix, although his stock has been reaching, Bo Nix, etc., etc. It's not an ideal position, especially when there's going to obviously be guys higher rated on the board at that point. So nonetheless, if you're a Vikings fan, let me know what you think about this whole potential ordeal you guys will be in. From the Jets fans, let me know what are you willing to do to get this trade done, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.